Today we're going to be unboxing, setting up, and reviewing the 20th Anniversary Edition Hyperkin Duke. This is an update to the 3-year-old Hyperkin Duke controller, which was a remake of the original Xbox controller that dropped in 2001 known as the Fatty, or the Duke. I'm going to go over the pros and shortcomings of this chunk of plastic and who I think it's good for. It's a very small demographic or niche of gamers. Let's get it. So the original Xbox controller was designed by Seamus Blackley in 2001 and launched with all the consoles except for in the Japanese region. Now the original Duke was initially going to be called the Fatty, but they ended up calling it the Duke. But it is still a Fatty. It is a very big controller, and even for most North American hands, it's simply too big. However, there were some big-handed individuals and also just some Microsoft fanboys that absolutely love this controller and still do to this day, and that is why the Duke from Hyperkin sells pretty well. Now this controller has been out for 3 years. However, this 20th Xbox Anniversary Edition just came out a couple months ago, as did a purple Halo 20th Anniversary Cortana themed one, which is in transit to the gamer heaven and will be reviewed in the near future. So the original Duke or Fatty controller was only sold for around 2.5 years in North America only. Definitely scoop that up and put it in your controller collection because they're going to be worth a good chunk of change. The Duke or Fatty was discontinued 2.5 years after its launch for the S-Series controller, which is the only controller that was introduced in Japan, as it is substantially smaller and quite a bit more ergonomic. But to celebrate that heritage or lineage, that legacy of Xbox goodness, the Duke stays true to those roots by being a big old thick boy Fatty. Now in the box you get a little quick start guide, not much to it because, well, there isn't much to this controller. It is wired only with a 9-foot USB-C cable, and there are some people out there trying to swing this being wired as wanting to stay true to the original controller and whatnot. That's not it at all. There's only two reasons that controller companies go the wired route versus wireless and wired, because any wireless controller can be plugged in via a USB-C or micro USB cable, and that would be one, not being able to get the wireless licensing from Xbox, considering Microsoft is relatively stingy with those contracts. They do have one with Scuf or Corsair, which is their parent company, and then also controller companies such as AIM and Hex Gaming that start with a licensed Microsoft controller as the base and then customize from there. Those do have full wireless connectivity. Generally, third-party companies out there such as Razer and the Victrix Gambit, Turtle Beach, and some of the other controllers I've tested on this channel are going to be wired because they could not get that 2.4 gigahertz wireless licensing, and of course it does cut costs as wireless chips are expensive. But of course you're always going to get those gamers out there talking about zero input delay or lag or latency. I've debunked this several times. Several times. You do have some laser cut foam in here, perfectly holding your controller in for its journey to you, which I really do like. We're going to get a couple of controllers out here for size and weight comparison. This is ridiculous. Now this does have a screen in the middle. I have heard some people say it's LED. I have heard a couple of reviewers say it's OLED or organic light emitting diode. I can't find that information on the internet anywhere, and I'm not just going to assume they threw an OLED screen in here. OLED displays are relatively expensive. I can't imagine them throwing an OLED in here. It's most likely an LED backlit LCD screen. Why does it have a screen, you wonder? Well, whenever you press the center button, you will get an awesome original Xbox startup screen. If you get the purple Cortana version, you will get an awesome little Halo graphic or video that plays. You do also have the 20th anniversary branding on this version, as well as a lime green D-pad and a lime green trim piece up here to go with that Microsoft flair. You do have your 9-foot USB-C cable. No, that's a 6-footer, big dog. That ain't no 9-footer, let me tell you. It is braided in lime green, of course, to match that box and to match your hair because you're a diehard Microsoft fan. This doesn't have a breakaway or anything, and it is not very flexible. It is relatively lightweight, and it also does have a Velcro tieback, and it is one of the ones that stays connected to the cable, which I do actually like these. Oh, there is no way that's a 9-footer. 6-footer. That sucks. No, this is still wired. This is not long enough. But it's okay, I got you. In the description below, there is going to be a USB extender. It is a 10-foot USB extension cable, male on one end, female on the other. So that will basically take this whack little 6-footer to be a 16-footer, because since this is wired only, if you're playing at the PC, that's fine. You just plug into your tower, but for casual console play, when you're sitting back on your couch in the living room or you're laying back in bed in the bedroom, this is not long enough. So I got the Hyperkin Duke or Fatty lined up against the Xbox original S-Type controller, an Xbox One S controller, an Xbox Elite Series 2 controller, an Xbox 360 controller, an AIM DualSense controller for the PS5, as well as a Hex Gaming PS4 controller, which is literally like half of the surface area or shell size as the Hyperkin Duke, which is clearly substantially bigger than all these other controllers, and surprise, surprise, it's heavier than most of them as well. So I grabbed a couple of controllers off the display wall out there in the living room, and I guess you could say I have a smorgasbord or a plethora of controllers, chunks of plastic in front of me here. I want to get a little weight comparison. Size comparison is obvious. This is a big old thick boy over here. It has girth, length, width, It's just a big boy all around. It's been skipping no meals. Good, good. Low battery, turned itself off. That's what you like to see. One of those CR2032 watch batteries. Good thing I'm always prepared and have a surplus of these. Let's take them out of your mom's vibrator real quick. Hold on. All right, 12.2 ounces. A standard Xbox One S controller. This is the Cyberpunk 2077 edition over here. Very handsome looking controller. 8.5 ounces. Now granted, that doesn't have two AA's in the tray here. Microsoft Elite 2, which does have an internal battery, and this is generally a pretty darn hefty controller. 12.2. Identical to this big boy over here. So this tiny... dropped her. So this subjectively tinier controller is actually the same weight. Pretty hefty. This is a dense controller for sure. Now if they could just get their quality control dialed in on the Elite Series 1 and 2, that'd be awesome. All right, DualSense controller over here. Also a pretty hefty controller and substantially bigger than the DualShock 4 controller of the PS4. 10.8 ounces. Xbox 360 controller with batteries on board with this weird little battery tray that they use. Just silly. 9.4 pounds. So ergonomically, this actually feels pretty good. It really does. I'm 5'11", have relatively average North American male hands, I would say. Ergonomically, this actually feels pretty good. It gives you like a nice rounded sculpted shape on the front shell here that you can wrap your hand around. And the triggers are like all the way down here, but it just feels really good, to be honest. Also, I do like the silicone compound or rubber that they are using on these analog sticks. It is incredibly grippy, and I love these sticks. They are domed, yet they have a little bit of a concave dip as well. So they're both convexed and concave, kind of a hybrid stick, and they feel really good on the fingertips. Good range of motion, good resistance, nice snapback to neutral. And also, even though they don't have anti-friction or impact rings around the outside of the analog sticks, it's relatively smooth. You're not really grinding against rough plastic on the front shell when you are at full lock, and I really do like that. This little plastic bubble over the LED or OLED screen here is going to collect fingerprints and micro scratches like nobody's business, especially because you have to press this down to get that little startup graphic to play. D-pad does not feel great. It is pretty sloppy. It is a membrane design, so there is a rubber plunger mechanism under here, and all of the button presses just kind of melt together. You have like, did I press left or did I press down and left? It's all just kind of sloppy in there. L3 and R3 feel good. Now this is where things get interesting with the face buttons over here. On this controller, instead of them being up and to the right, they're almost perfectly vertical or above the right analog sticks. I mean, I guess you could actually get good with still aiming like this with the meat of your right thumb and still hitting the face buttons, since this does not have rear buttons or paddles. I guess you could claw grip this too, but it would be like wild. Now, a couple of differences here from the original Duke or Fatty controller of the Xbox original. These are now not separate buttons like they used to be. Like, for example, I do remember in a lot of games, this would be to turn on the flashlight, and this would be to open up your PDA or your in-game map. These are now bound to the bumpers, and yes, this does have bumpers. The original did not have bumpers. It just had these two linear or analog triggers that you could squeeze in varying amounts. So this now does have bumpers to bring it into the modern era. They feel horrible. They feel absolutely horrible. These bumpers, they might as well have just stuck with the original design and just had these be the bumpers. I think that might have been the play here. Horrible. They feel mushy and they're tiny and just, they're bad. But these face buttons, not only are they in an interesting place being almost vertically above the right analog stick, they're also very small and very cramped up or very close to each other. Technically, with my skinny little thumb here, I can depress all four of the face buttons. That could be good for fighting games if you like to bust off combos and whatnot, but I would like to see these a little bit bigger and spaced apart, but they're staying true to the original, and I get that. Triggers feel really good. You do get a weird little hollow tinny sound inside of the plastics, but they feel fucking phenomenal. Here's why. Resistance. You get a really good... You get like an insanely good resistance. Very satisfying. Kind of a slow snapback or rebound, but actually depressing them, you get like an insanely good resistance. This is USB-C, not micro USB, so that is good to see. This is actually totally playable, like ergonomics wise and everything. I want to see that startup animation. I'm going to cut some of the lights in here. By some of the lights, I mean like all of them. All right, there's that one. Ceiling light. This is going to be dope. I don't think you're ready for it. Oh, honey. You guys need a close-up of that. You didn't get the full glory from back there. I know you didn't. Get a little bit closer to me. Sit on my lap, why don't you? This logo, by the way, always stays on indefinitely, so you're going to be seeing this constantly. But if you want to replay the graphic, press down the button, press it one more again to start it over. So this is indeed the Xbox original startup screen. sick. So that's the main difference there on this LCD screen, is it now has that 20-year placard, as where the original Hyperkin Duke did not. And it did not have this white or gray Xbox logo. It would stay lime green with the Xbox X on there. Now, one quick note about the Hyperkin Duke: if you just want to plug the USB into a charger brick and use it as somewhat of a decoration and have people press the button and play the little graphic, but you weren't actually plugging this into a Windows 10 or 11 PC or an Xbox One or Series, it doesn't work like that. I actually tried it just to have it on display next to the Xbox Series, but I'm going to end up having to plug this into one of the USB ports on the back of the Series X. So just a small note, if you want to put this on display in your game room as a decoration and press the button and run the little graphic, it does need to be plugged into an Xbox device. I gotta say, I am incredibly surprised, both pleasantly as well as a little bit gross as well. It is impressive how far we have come with the ergonomics and features of controllers, but having a modern controller with USB-C and that awesome LCD screen with that startup graphic that you can play Xbox Series and PC games on is really cool. In fact, I cannot wait to play Halo 1 and 2 and maybe Doom 3 on the Hyperkin Duke, considering those are games that I played with that original Duke controller, and I think that will give me a real nostalgia boner, or at least a quarter retro gaming chub, which I'm in dire need of. Now, one thing that needs talked about and simply cannot be ignored, in my opinion, is the fact that this is a $90 controller that has no premium features such as rear buttons or paddles, removable thumbsticks, trigger locks, an audio block module like the Turtle Beach Recon. It retails for $90. Granted, the last generation version that is micro USB, not USB-C, doesn't have the 20th anniversary placards and plays a different graphic on the internal screen. Can be had in its green shell version for $55 currently on Amazon, but the version that we're reviewing here today is a $90 controller that is ergonomically and feature-wise quite inferior to what we have with even a standard modern Xbox Series controller, but it is still wired. Now, especially because this controller is supposed to be giving into the history or heritage lineage of Microsoft Xbox controllers, you would think they would really try and pop for the licensing with the wireless connectivity, because a lot more casual console gamers that own Xboxes, maybe don't have a PC, just strictly want to use this on an Xbox, would definitely appreciate the option of having wireless play in the bedroom or living room. Then if they want to go wired with their PC, they can do that. However, I doubt anybody is going to be doing any competitive multiplayer with this thing. It just simply is too big. It doesn't have rear buttons or paddles. The layout of everything doesn't feel as efficient and effective of what we have with modern controllers. One of two things needs to happen here: either reduce the price $20 or get the wireless branding, the wireless licensing from Microsoft. Now, if they wanted to get spicy, muy caliente, and sprinkle a little salt on that bitch, what they could do is also come out with a Duke Pro edition with either 2 or 4 rear buttons, not paddles, but buttons actually sunken in or flush with the rear shell, and some trigger stops and bumpers that don't suck ass like the 2 on there. That would be pretty sick, because we did not have any premium paddle controllers with the Xbox. Those got introduced with the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I actually have a Scuff Beast controller right back there, which is a 4-paddle Xbox 360 controller. Actually very rare and sought after. And I think that would be really cool to get a modern esports flair on the classic ergonomics of the Duke original controller. I think that'd be wild. But overall, who I think this is good for would be collectors, and that's pretty much it. This isn't really ergonomically comfortable. I know I said earlier it was ergonomically comfortable, but I meant for what it is, an Xbox original replica in comparison to what we have with modern controllers like the PS5 DualSense and the Xbox Series controllers. No, ma'am. And it's not wireless, and it's kind of expensive. If you are an Xbox original fan and you're an old timer like myself, got a little gray in your bush and whatnot, you might want to have one of these bad boys on display next to your brand new Xbox console. This is linked in the description below. Check me out at Facebook Gaming, where I'm a partner and upload a ton of exclusive content. Down there in the description section below, I do have a link to my merch store if you're sick of being naked, and I do have several exclusive discount codes for my audience. Scrolling past the description section into the comment section, drop your experience with the original Xbox controller, whether it's the remake, the Hyperkin Duke, or it is the original Fatty or Duke. What is your experience with this controller? If you enjoyed this controller review, shoving a big fat thumbs up will help the video to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well, help them make a decision if this controller is right for their needs. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, as well as tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, and honest gaming peripheral reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. See you tomorrow.